Welcome to the Maple Leaf Business Podcast. My name is Fraser Simpson. I'm here with a special guest today, Philipe Laborde, and we're going to be talking about everything, taxes, crypto, a couple of apps. We're going to provide value. So, Philipe, I thought we'd start with a little introduction about yourself, and I'll hand it over to you about your origin story and how you ended up sitting across from me.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate that. My story is, I guess, the story of a restless soul. So I'm an entrepreneur. I started out getting involved with like the startup scene. Then I helped build a experiential marketing company, and then I got involved with people from all kinds of other countries and investors and so on. So I've learned a lot about kind of, I guess every day I wake up and I ask myself, why am I here? And is this sort of the right thing to be doing? So everything I do kind of goes around the idea, am I leading a meaningful and effective life? And I think as an entrepreneur, because you have limited time, is you do that. You ask these questions, you ask, am I doing the best? Am I doing it the most efficient way? Should I be delegating stuff to other people? So that has been part of my journey is learning how to be a better human and being more effective at business.
How about your coding and U of T professorship? And,
Yes.
And your involvement with training Google or doing events for them? Talk a bit about that.
Yeah. So back in back as part of Bash, we were doing a lot of experiential marketing. We did for Google and the media brands. We were doing. So I guess the big brands, they always have this challenge. They want to bring people in to make them aware of their services, and they usually do these big catered events. And so we did all the technology related to that, all the interactive screens and so on. A lot of fun, a lot of work. And then, at some point I wanted to take a break from the startup world, which is quite taxing and hard. And I was teaching coding boot camps. So teaching people, and this is a whole new experience, you're teaching people who come from a world that is often totally unrelated to coding. And if you get into coding is a whole different mindset. You have to think in a certain, very disciplined way. You have like challenge after challenge because you're just trying to figure out one problem after next, what tool to use. So if you take someone from like a marketing person or someone from sales and you say, okay, in 3 months, I have to help you see the world in a different way in your head so that you can start writing software. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of tools you have to learn how to do. It's an interesting experience. So I did that and I really enjoyed it because I love working with people. I took a whole bunch of, I worked for a couple of coding companies, boot camp training companies. And I'd take people in their 20s, 30s, and sometimes 40s, help them learn to think like a coder and how to structure their thoughts so they could, and I guess also it's just at the end of the day, the discipline, because you're going to be doing 12-hour grueling days. But you learn a lot about what your limits are and actually how much more you can do than you think you could do. Because these people they had lives, they had families, and they had to put this on hold to just learn how to, use various React, database technologies, web technologies, HTML, JavaScript, all these things every day for literally 3 months. It was nuts.
Wow. And
working with other people on the group to figure it out. So it was a lot of fun, a great experience. Not that I'd want to do it every day, being the student, but
okay. Let's talk. Let's change to the current state of affairs with because you've got a IT background in coding, and you understand a lot of the technologies going out there. So, the big change right now is the consumer blockchain, and even though there's been the cryptos have crashed a bit. But the technology with NFTs and smart contracts and all that, it's here to stay. We're going to be selling houses on it down the road, doing our tax returns on it down the road. Where do you see the consumer blockchain a year from now, 5 years from now? How do you think it'll be, impact our lives?
So, and I'm paraphrasing the quote. There's a quote I had, and it was, history never repeats itself, but it rhymes. And so if I take us back a little bit, way back when the personal computer came around, I don't remember who it was some big money guy said, oh, the personal computer will never be in everyone's house, right? It's just going to be for corporations and so on. And we know what happened with that, right? Like we went from computers barely existing, we had them in a lab in the university, to now we all walk around. Like one of these little things, this is more powerful than a computer from 15, 20 years ago. And in fact, nowadays, a modern phone has the same chips in it that you have in your iPad, your desktop. So we've got to the point where there's nothing we do that we don't depend on computers. And yet, 20 years ago, you would have never imagined that, right? Unless you were maybe a visionary like Alvin Toffler. So I would say, okay, take that little bit of history, and now let's put ourselves in 20 years, right? I can guarantee you that the world in 20 years will be nothing like we can imagine. But there are hints, and the hints are, what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing things like blockchain that allow a distributed ledger over the internet. They're huge. They're everywhere. We all know what Bitcoin is now. We didn't know what Bitcoin was, 10 years ago. We're seeing AI, and I think AI is a big untold story because although it's in the media, I don't think people understand how big it's going to be as far as changing life. So if you say blockchain and a way to track information across the whole internet space, and AI, which is adding intelligence to be able to do things for people, I think we can see the future is going to be a very different from today. Hopefully very magical, not sure, but definitely very different from today. And we're going to see things like blockchain, ways for selling, as we spoke about, selling real estate, and then have a record of ownership and so on. I'm sure at some point, I pray voting will actually go to the blockchain, right? Because I can't handle this nonsense where there's like fake ballots and stuffed ballots. It should all be on the blockchain. You should be able to see that ledger of votes. I'm pretty sure we're going to see, probably a way for tracking legal cases and so on, all go on the blockchain. So ultimately,
doing tax returns on
tax returns will absolutely be on the blockchain.
Eliminate fraud for, I was thinking about doing this. We've talked about this. We're providing an NFT with the tax return so that you can then use that as proof of income for credit applications for mortgage. So
that's brilliant.
Literally, if it was used in that way, you would eliminate all the fraud almost overnight.
The whole transparency, your whole thing is like when everything is on the blockchain. Now, keep in mind, there are ways with the blockchain, like if you look at like Ripple and these things, you can encrypt stuff. So things don't have to be visible to everyone, but it's locked down on the blockchain.
Right.
So the same could apply to things like tax returns.
Tax returns,
Maybe you don't want everyone to know your assets and your money, but
you could give them access.
But you can give them access, right?
Yeah.
And I think we spoke about this before. I think this is going to be massive, for credit worthiness, and it should be global. I mean, I was in Panama. I'm now spending a good chunk of time in Panama. Well, I don't like it that I have to rebuild my whole credit record there. It should be a way that you have a certain worthiness. You're a worthy person. It should be a record that you can carry with you around the globe. Maybe to the moon, maybe to Mars. Who knows, right? So
and same with intellectual property. You look at the Disneys and that when people developing albums and music. If you can, these NFTs, they can be, you could or even say going to a hockey game. You've got the NFT. You can prove that I was at that hockey game 15 years ago when they won the Stanley Cup. Blah 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 blah. Right. So just the record of history through improving. The ownership of these things and the royalties.
For lawsuits even, right? Or you get something bad, it could be a blockchain.
The loss, I think, it would, like if you did a lawsuit and you lost, it's on your record. And then you get the financial assets right there. So there's no more of this, dodging around lawsuits or losing a lawsuit and then not suffering any financial damage. And those things are... Now, see how that gets implemented and how they manufacture. But I can't see the governments getting in the way of it now. I think it's just the cat's out of the bag.
I think that is to be seen. Governments do seem to get involved in these things. But speaking about governments and movements, why don't we talk a little bit about currencies
Currency,
right
sure.
now? So one of the biggest movements I've seen in the last few months is I've been seeing a massive change of like devaluation of many global Western currencies in particular, right? You look at the Canadian dollar, you look at the euro, you look at the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar.
All because of the U.S. dollar.
And they're all relative to the U.S. dollar. The Japanese yen, they're all relative to the U.S. dollar. They're being destroyed. Like the U.S. dollar has gone up in value by, I don't know what the number is 20% or more in the last 2 months or so.
Yep.
And that's definitely going to be concerning for trade. That's concerning for inflation. Look at we have high inflation number one, and you add to that the exchange rate. This is going to be a pain point in the months to come. And so what happened when I was seeing this stuff, because I do deal with US dollars, I was dealing with euros, it was something I started thinking about, what's going on here. And one of the first things you learn if you do economics, well, if you talk about currencies and so on, is you learn that the value, and this is an important point that I learned from an instructor who actually now, I think he's a technical advisor for BlackRock, so one of the bad guys, but he was a very good instructor. His name was Jean Bovin, and he said the value of a currency is equal to how much of the currency is there divided by kind of the GDP, the number of services requiring the currency. So if I have, let's say, $100 million, and I have, let's say 50 services, well, that's going to be 100 million divided by 50, means that's the value. If I now change that $100 million of currency to 200 million, so I've created twice as much currency, and yet the economy has not grown, now effectively I devalued the currency by 50%.
Yep.
And that's what we've been seeing happen.
Yes.
We had the lockdowns, so that actually, do you guys know, could I get some water? Some water, please. Thank you. We had the lockdowns, and so we had no movement as far as GDP went, and we saw massive increase. And if you look at the M1 and the M2 of the currencies, they've gone up massively. So the Canadian, even the US dollar, the euro, the yen, the Chinese yuan, they've all gone up, and yet the services haven't increased. There's inflation there that's been locked in just by the nature of the economics, and we're only starting to feel it as our economies pick up. And so I think that combined with the devaluation of most of the currencies are going to be a challenge for us going forward. Thank you so much. That's all I have to say on that topic.
All right, let's switch to a couple of interesting tax articles.
Wait, before tax articles, sorry. I do want to say one little more thing on that. And I'm going to plug a product here. I have no affiliation to the product. One of the challenges I had, so I've been in Europe, I was in Panama, I was in Canada, I was in the US. When you're in a bunch of different places, you realize how your local banks are very small in their thinking. So my Canadian card wouldn't work when I was in Portugal. The exchange rate's horrible when you use it. I found a service that I think is a fantastic service, and I guess, can I provide a link below? I'll provide a link at some point. It's called Wise, wise.com. And they're a money exchange service, but they really are kind of like a banking service. You can have accounts with them in a whole bunch of currencies, and you can use them with Apple Pay and with their card to pay in countries around the world. And they give you the exchange rate of the moment, the spot exchange rate. So they were fantastic when I was using them. US dollars, in Portugal I was using euros, Canadian dollars. Fantastic service.
Euros just got smashed too. Right?
Yeah.
It's almost equivalent to, isn't it?
Nearly the US dollar. They're nearly 1-1 now. It's nuts, right?
Wow.
And the pound, whew, that's a whole different story.
You see what happened with when she came in, like they tried to decrease taxes
on the wealthy,
and isn't it funny how like they, the whole world actually dumped on them, going because everybody else is raising taxes, and they realize you got to fight inflation.
They couldn't afford it because
they can't afford it.
They've hemorrhaged money, and now they're trying to cut in taxes. Just not going to work, right?
Right. So she's almost lost her job now. I think she's going to be. She'll make it through the week or whatever. She's.
Well, they've recovered, so they did step back on that. Yeah. So they have recovered, but still, the pound is not a currency I'd want to be holding right now. No. It's gone down.
No.
Anyway, yeah, to the
So, yeah, this week, well, past you, because you were away and stuff, they've had a couple of interesting articles in the Globe and Mail and the Financial Post. So there was a famous case, we talked about it before, in British Columbia. These two women, one was an ex-CRA officer, had to scam, 15, 20 years ago, and they got caught a bunch of investors, about 600, and they went to prison for 33 months, whatever. And but these
3 years,
investors got hammered with penalties and gross negligence penalties, and Revenue Canada really pesters these people to make an example out of them, right? Saying that they should have known better. So there was the lead case in that was just heard or concluded 2 weeks ago, and the judge came out and made a 54-page decision, which normally they do like a 2-page decision. You're wrong, you paid a tax, here it is, 2 pages. But so what he said in the 54 pages was he was completely critical of the Canada Revenue Agency. The whole process took 15 years, not giving documentation to the other side, hiding the fact and strategies of, like, they raided the investors' homes and that, and they wouldn't provide the documents for the reasons for it, why they were doing it, or certain stuff that they would take computers and that would be lost, or they said it was, and then they would use that information to go get other people, right? So it was completely, very, very poor report card.
Borderline illegal what they're doing there.
They said the judge was very harsh on the Department of Justice and said that they were worse than the perpetrators. And they spent 3 years in jail.
Worse than
that. So that was that 54-page decision. Now, just the past 2 days ago, Tim Sesnick from the Globe and Mail, who is the top tax, he's a very interesting guy because he wrote the UFI a couple of years after me, but he won the gold medal. And that's like, he's like wins the top, like that's sick to win the top prize. Like there's, so he's a top dog. So he got a Globe and Mail, article, or was able to, write for them right away. Mm-hmm. And he came out scathing report about, after this, with the British Columbia judge said, he said, this has been going on for years. And I've seen it myself, where you have people in tax shelters that have to suffer, litigation for 15, 20 years. Like, it's just way too long.
That's insane. 15 years.
It's insane. And then some of these things too, Tim was going on. It's a very good article. I'll put it in the notes below that you can link to it. Both of them, the decision as well. And there should be some rules. Another example today, just for example, I was talking to a collection officer about one of my clients, and they owed something like 20 grand in tax, right? So, and she was just very young, I could tell, and just trying to be like a cop the whole time, going, yeah, you didn't, we want a letter from your bank saying that you couldn't get financing for your home, or we're going to garnish the home, or we're going to put a lien on. I'm going, you're talking 20 grand. And he already gave a payment arrangement of $700 a month or something. She wouldn't accept it. Like, just completely not reasonable. But they've got so much power that you have to negotiate with them, and now I have to go above her, do a service complaint, and go through, other avenues. But he was talking about,
what's the recourse? Maybe you can tell us. So what's the recourse? Let's say you find they're being unfair.
Well, if they're being unfair, what you do, first thing, you go to the supervisor, and then you file a service complaint at the same time.
Or hire someone like you.
Or hire somebody like me, and I'll just make their life miserable, right? Because I'm right across from tax court. That's right. So what I'll do is, I shouldn't be saying this live, so I'm not going to actually. I do have certain strategies that I use that push the envelope, but all it does is speed up the process.
You know what's fair, and you're able to prevent them from messing with your clients, I guess.
Well, plus my client is offering, has already made a reasonable payment arrangement based on a budget that's been submitted. Please, now you're not being reasonable. Yeah. But see to enforce that on the other side, there is things that you have to do, and then you have to get somebody like me involved at some point if you really want to get your rights, right? So,
right.
Those two articles were, really can be used now too with that ruling. Can be used by guys like me for future tax cases. So, if there's been delay, I'm going to be applying everything that's over 5 years. I'm going to be applying for a delay, and I'm going to cite that case and say dismiss it. How can you say you've already got a precedent? So it should be. I'm sure I'm not the only guy thinking that.
Do you know how many cases have been tied up for more than 5 years? Is there a
Oh,
lot?
thousands. Like I would say, yeah, thousands, probably 10. I don't know. It could be 100 to 200. A lot, for sure, a lot.
You should bring that stat out sometime. That would
There
be
should be. Well, that's the other transparency thing with the
Yeah.
Canada Revenue Agency. We should have numbers about that. And plus, even with this court case, now we've had a judge come out and say that from the tax court. What is the remedy? So somebody should be held accountable. There should be an investigation. We should look at the procedures of the Canada, and change the culture. And that's what Tim was saying. So I recommend everybody reading that and sending it to their MP. And the people need to make a movement for that in order to get things changed. The other bad one is freezing people's bank accounts. Like they're just doing it indiscriminately now. Like, and doing it computerized. So you're talking about AI before.
Yeah.
It's getting bad where people are not even involved and accounts are being frozen. Right.
And that can destroy a business,
Destroy a
a person's life,
business,
right? You
yeah.
can't pay your employees, you can't pay yourself,
horrible.
you can't do
Yeah.
anything, right?
Yeah.
So that's not.
So anyway, we were Canada Revenue Agency's on the backpedaling right now. Did you just to change to something a little bit interesting with?
I mean, that was interesting. But something
Okay,
else
not that that was interesting, but Mr. Beast. I think he's the top YouTube guy.
He's up there for
He's
sure.
up there. Did you hear that he just turned down $1 billion for his YouTube channel?
My kid told me that.
And so I went into this. I go $1 billion. So I had to follow him and I check it out and did a little research. Do you know that they're saying he's probably worth $10 billion, and it could even be more than that? And do you know that what he's selling is one of the things is he's got this Mr. Beast burger, right?
Really?
So you can buy through Uber Eats or whatever, like anywhere in the States, Canada. You can even buy it in Canada. I was going to do it, but it's ridiculous, like a $20 burger.
You gotta bring it on here sometime.
Oh no, but anyway, so I started following him. This guy
He's funny though. He's very funny.
he's pretty funny, but he did the Squid Game and those kind of videos,
And
but
he
it's
does
all
all
like
those-
it's like they're all pranks.
Yeah,
Right?
but the kids love him. Like,
The kids
like
love-
I have a 12-year-old, and I can see how these kids they love this kind of stuff, right? I may look at it and say, well, okay, that's kind of like interesting, but a waste of time. It's not so for the kids. They love it, and
But the money
the
involved.
following he
Do you know
has.
he's spending millions of dollars on these videos
He's making many
to make,
millions
and then
back,
making
right?
more than that. So anyway, kids out there, start up a YouTube channel. That seems to be the way to go.
Well, I'm going to say something there. If you start up a YouTube channel, remember it's a kind of commitment. You have to do it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And you should only start up something that you are passionate about.
Right.
So I'm going to be that self-help guy. You remember, if you're committing to it, you want to love the topic. And if you have something you love, you should share about it and be regular, consistent. Share every week, every 2 weeks, right? So
I thought we'd
That's what
finish
it is.
with something a little bit
just like
light.
you share your stuff, you love it too.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more about Panama. What's going on?
Panama.
Now, is it the lower taxes that attracted you down there, or is it the weather?
So Panama is it's an interesting place. Of course, Panama has a bad rap because of the Panama Papers. From 2018, and that, of course, that made me curious about what the place was about. But I think it's probably their branding that got me that sense of a beach with a coconut tree. Something about that. I love beaches and coconuts. So I went down there, just to check it out. I'd been down to the Caribbean, so I knew that. But when I looked on the weather, Panama, if you just check the weather, it's like 27 to 33 degrees every month of the year. Consistent, like summer tropical weather the whole year round. And for me, the beautiful weather, at that point, it was easy to get to get residency there. They had a friendly nations visa for residency, which I did do. They have stopped that, but I still there are other ways you can reach out to Fraser. There are other people that have ways to get residency, and yeah, they have a very favorable tax environment. legal, favorable tax environment. So Panama is a pretty interesting place. It's a typical Central American place. You have a huge, like you have Panama City, which is a first world busy country in the financial areas. You see, Maseratis and expensive cars, but then you go to the countryside and you'll see like cows walking behind a guy on a horse, right? So you have that huge difference of things, but you have nice beaches though, and you do have great weather.
A lot of Canadians down there?
There's a lot of retirees. So a lot of Canadians and Americans used to go to Costa Rica.
Right.
Costa Rica is still, I believe, very nice, but it's got quite expensive. And so a lot of these people are now moving down to Panama. Panama is US dollar based, by the way. So you have, US dollar bank accounts you can use in the States easily. You can use your accounts in Canada easily. So it's got a lot going for it. It's at times it's a little more bureaucratic than maybe what we'd want. So you do need to know, you should have like a good accountant, good lawyer for helping you with some of those things.
Call us.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining us, Phil.
Thank you.
Enjoy the chat, and we're signing off for another day. God save our king. Gotta go home and watch the Leafs win.